Well, hello there, everyone. We are back for a saucy down kind of a rabbit hole episode here of what we can do with junk that we find. In this case, it's junk laying around my office and stuff that's either been brought in because it's mostly been stuff that's been upgraded. So they want a new computer. A business wants a new computer. We sell them 4 or 5. We bring back their old ones. They go into a stack pile somewhere, and I refuse to throw them away because I might be able to do something with them, or they can be useful for parts, or sometimes they are thrown away because they're just not worth anything at all. So this is the inspiration for this: is if you find someone who just happens to have stuff laying around, or if there's something laying around at work that you can have, what can you do with it? Something cheap on eBay or something free? Usually something business grade. So this rabbit hole started with trying to have a Dell, this Dell, work with Windows XP. That was not too great, but let's see how that went. Here we start this off with a Dell Inspiron. Definitely a real trash system here. Look at all the crap that was on this case. I have no idea where this came from, but it was something that was in the pile. So I thought it would be a good candidate for this project. So we'll get inside of this thing here, find out what kind of condition the insides are here. And at least this has got thumb screws on it, which of course we can't use our thumbs for because they're always way too tight. So what's the point of a thumb screw if it's not put on by a thumb? But hey, I digress. The biggest issue with this particular project is power supply sizes and things like that. But when we're running low power components, it's not too bad of an idea. Here's the inside. You can see it's a very filthy little beast. What else should I expect nowadays? These computers never seem to live in a place that have any kind of cleanliness whatsoever. I suppose I have seen worse though. At least Chewbacca wasn't found inside of this case, but it's could have been a lot better. I've definitely seen better, but it's a great candidate for this because might as well just consider this a trash-picked system with as filthy as it is inside. Those are popular builds nowadays on Windows. Something nice about this system too is that it has an M.2 slot right here. So that makes nice for, fun things. Can't tell how many M.2s I have laying around just as trash parts too. Because I've pulled so many of them out there, 256 gig, which are completely worthless sizes nowadays, but for Windows XP build, they might not be too bad. So here it is on the on the K6. And, so here it is on the K6, and yeah, still looking grody as ever. Although the insides are clean enough to eat off of now. Got some scratches there. Put this side down, we won't see those. So maybe we won't even have to waste some spray paint on that. I don't know. Somebody had it scuffing this across the ground or something. I don't know. The CD-ROM is, of course, that right there. Of course, it looks weird because it is weird. The one that was in it's right there. And speaking of this pile of parts, if this computer is good and behaves itself and does what I want it to do, it's going to get rewarded, kind of, sort of. But I need to change I need to spray the hell out of that thing with some cleaner or just change the faceplate. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. So let me show you guys what's going on, and that's another 8 gig stick of RAM for it too, by the way. So like I said, if it gets lucky, if it gets good and it's lucky and everything else, it's going to get upgraded after the point of this video, which is Can it run Windows XP? Can junk laying around at work that nobody cares about, thrown away, we might as well call this dumpster find. I find that that's a popular term on YouTube. Dumpster find. This is a dumpster find, except it's my own dumpster. Will this dumpster find Dell on Windows XP 64-bit? I don't know. So far, so now we're going to get all the things plugged into the things and make the things go and do things. Like this thing right here that makes us have video things that come out the back of the computer. So we're going to give that in there, and we're going to have to go ahead and give it some power too, because they still do require power nowadays, despite all the wireless and Bluetooth stuff. I still haven't quite figured out how to make that Bluetooth. And then, of course, something very fitting for this build is a nice Apple keyboard, and complete with Microsoft mouse. So at least we've got something here that is Microsoft being plugged into a Microsoft computer. So that should make it happy, right? I mean, at least something's still Microsoft. So let's go ahead and see if we can get XP to install. So one of the nice things, of course, about having a semi-modern computer is that I can capture with HDMI capture. I can capture all the fun things. So I'm going to go ahead and give the old XP boot drive another try here. That just kind of goes past so fast. I'm giving this a try. But the thing I'm noticing is that this doesn't just come with the drivers like I've seen shown in other videos. So I'm not really sure what to do. I already know this is going to fail. So I'm going to go ahead and give it another reboot here. And it seems like it could possibly be because of the IDE, let's say IDE controller, HCI controller. I get the error about your system is not fully compatible HCI. You must update your BIOS. Press F7 to bypass while you try to bypass, and it asks you for processor type, and then we don't get anywhere. So you can see what this thing is doing here. It gets in the Windows setup, and I am running this off the thumb drive right now. We can run F7 right here, and of course it doesn't actually tell us we pressed it, but we can go through and do all this stuff. You see it finds all the fun drivers as usual. I'm just pausing through this so it doesn't take a half hour of video time. Once we get to this point, we're going to get a nice blue screen of death there telling us, naughty, naughty, you're not in full compliance. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but this is one of these fun things that when you're trying to do unsupported hardware, yeah, you run into strange things that you never thought were going to be a thing. And I'm hesitant to update the BIOS on this thing because I don't know if that would fix it, and I don't know what kind of other issues updating the BIOS would cause. The system does have a BIOS update as recently as 2024, if you can believe that. So I don't know. We may get desperate and try that at some point, but for right now, we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. So I'm going to have another look in the BIOS here again, just to see if there's anything I could have possibly missed, because, that's very likely. And I've already got things set to legacies, and maybe I should set to UEFI. Maybe it'll work then. Right. I had turned off virtualization just in case it was adding another level of complexity to the boot systems and figuring things out and making driver installations happen and happy, but that's not what the case was. I'm not exactly sure what the issue is. Everyone seems to point to the storage controller, but that is HCI or RAID only. We have no choice for IDE. So that could be a problem. I'm not sure. This is all the fun stuff again when you're dealing with unsupported hardware. I don't know. I wouldn't have thought that XP would have been too old for something like this. But it is turning out to sort of look like that. But I know other people have gotten XP to run on other hardware. But I'm trying Windows XP 64-bit here, not just the normal one. Because why have 8 gig of RAM if you're not going to be able to use it all? Oh, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. That's not the point. We want all of it. And so just to eliminate some variables, I'm going to dig out the old XP SP3 disk and just see if it'll even boot up off of this, because who knows? Maybe it's just that copy of XP. Ooh, that's nice. The XP64 that I have, that I got off of the interwebs, archive.org. I don't know. Of course, we're back to this familiar screen now, so let's go ahead and give it a boot off the old CD-ROM and see what happens here. That's a good sign. That means that's still working. So we'll give this a go and see if we get the same error or not with it. And so no surprise here again. We get the exact same error message. No surprise. So it's not the Windows XP edition. Now, some people said it was because you had to have Service Pack 3 in order to be fully ACPI compliant. Apparently earlier XP version, the RTM version, was buggy on that setup, so that's why I'm trying this. But you can see once again, hardwareupdate.com. I wonder if that's actually a real website still. So anyway, I'm going to have to do some more investigating with this. We may be getting more desperate to try BIOS update at this point. So as it turns out, none of that stuff that I just said is going to actually happen with this system, because the ACPI problem is something that I might be able to get around if I really cared a lot, and if I could find the appropriate ACPI patch files that I did find possibly, although the guy was doing a Ryzen system, so I'm not sure. And you have to compress those into the disk image, which you've extracted, and then you have to re-flash it, or use that thing to make the USB drive. It's possible to do it, maybe, if it works, but we still run into the issue of no PS2 ports. Apparently that is an issue with trying to do this, that it may or may not happen, I don't know, but supposedly because of the lack of USB driver support for modern hardware on Windows XP, that you're not going to be able to use your keyboard and mouse on said hardware because of said drivers missing. So that's probably true. That's what I ran into with the Windows 98 unsupported hardware build thing I did, was that the USB drivers ports would work, including the thumb drive even was recognized as a drive until it got into Windows, and then all that stuff just kind of said, no, we're not gonna work anymore. On that particular one, the USB did work, but it was very hit and miss. Sometimes it would actually just completely stop working after, a few mouse movements. The keyboard would suddenly, like, it was conflicting with the two. It was really strange. So I ended up having to disable the USB ports on that build anyway, because that all the fun stuff started happening after I think it was either the video card, or I think it was the video card. When I installed the drivers for the video card, all of a sudden the USB, one of the two wasn't working, and disabling USB was what ended up allowing it to boot in. It was really strange. So this is going to just be a Windows 7 box, which is a little more boring, but it's still part of the fun of hey, it's a trash picked system. It's just my trash heap. So, but trash pick system. We're going to just put Windows 7 on here because that is what was supported from Dell. So we're going to be easy to find drivers for it, and it's just going to kind of work. So we're just going to call it a very latter and it's a 6th gen. So yeah, it's pretty much the latter end of support for Windows 7 as far as that goes. I do have 9th gen. If we really care about doing an ultimate Windows 7 build, which could, get really scary because you're still talking about possibly modern video card support. You got to have a cutoff with this stuff. You got to have a cutoff. So the cutoff is, what could I find in the trash heap at work? That's the cutoff. Now, the other fun thing is that I'm going to be putting the Asus Zonar card that I bought a couple of years ago for another project, and I ended up not using it. But Amazon thanked me for giving this a new lease on life. So, and they gave a little pretty little sticker on the box there. See, it says that right there. Because sometimes I just like to buy stuff from the scratch and dent section of Amazon. So, you save a little bit of money there. This actually is kind of nice because it's PCI Express, and it's also it's got a front panel header on it as well. So this will completely replace the one that's there. It has a little more RAM on it there. You can see the little chips there. It has some memory on it. It looks cool. So we're going to put that in here. I think this will be a very good Windows 7 era sound card to throw in there. That's been sitting for 2 years. So technically I don't have any cost immediately in it. Maybe you could say. So that's the update so far. So let's go ahead and put Windows 7 on this old beast. So yeah, here's how that turned out. I said to hell with it. I have that system sitting back there at work, but I just took it back. I actually did start shooting video. I was trying to look through my files up here, and I did have video putting it together for the intention of Windows 7. But I changed my mind on that because we're talking about. It still fits into the trash system. The whole will it work with junk thing that I'm trying to do here. So, but what I decided to do instead was go a little bit more extreme on the Windows 7 side of things. But the issue, I believe for certain, is it's a BIOS implementation issue. After Windows XP support ended, and I think this is true with 98 as well, in 2000, and every time Microsoft kills official support for an operating system, the hardware support also drops away. And I'm not just talking about driver support, I'm also talking about basic input-output system support for this hardware. I think that they've removed whatever was there in the BIOS, and I also tried this on an HP system of equal, it's either 6th or 7th gen, and I have an Acer as well that's a 6th gen, the same era, and all of them throw the ACPI error. And it has something to do with the fact that Windows XP is looking for an ACPI match in its list. It's got a text OEM. The 64-bit isn't TXT OEM or whatever. It's a different file. There's also a place in there to disable ACPI detection. You set it from 2 to 0, but that also didn't work. So, but like I said, if you could even get past that, you still have the issue of possibly having USB support not functioning correctly, and then you have to have PS2. And see, this is the problem with this stuff, is that this legacy hardware that used to work perfectly fine doesn't work anymore. I also have run into this issue with newer hardware past 4th gen. I don't know about 5th gen because I've never had 5th gen to mess with. But, I have in a server, but I use using Windows 10 workstation. but it's once it gets past a certain point, it's dropped off. The basic support dropped off. The legacy support, I've had this issue. I have to run old 4th gen at most at work because of Hirons. I use a Hirons CD 10.6, nothing newer, because that's the last version that had the hard drive regeneration, which goes in and repairs bad sectors on hard drives, which does work. But without proper IDE support, that Hirons disk won't see SATA hard drive. So I kind of figured this was going to be an issue. I didn't realize ACPI was going to be the issue. I was fully prepared to possibly look at putting a PCI Express to SATA card, controller card, something that would have text drivers in it. I did also try integrating drivers into that thumb drive just to see, and I actually found, believe it or not, Intel did actually have a slightly newer chipset driver, Intel, what the hell they call it, Intel storage controller driver, whatever the hell. But that still didn't detect it either. And it didn't matter anyway because they just kept getting ACPI error. So I don't think that's related to the controller, the IDE controller. But this is with OEM hardware. This is with a Dell, Acer, and an HP. So if it's an Asus motherboard or an MSI motherboard or a Gigabyte motherboard, I don't know. Maybe they still have proper legacy support. The other thing, too, I'm thinking now after all this, after I've been messing with this for a while, is that a lot of that stuff is probably emulated. And I think someone who said that in my comments years ago when I did the 386 versus Celeron video said 380, was it 16-bit support, something like that was something like that. And I'm thinking that all of that hardware, all that legacy support is just kind of, it's pushed to the side. We have to have it there because, Microsoft still is making these old operating systems. And XP was supported long, they had the extension of support, and then it also had another extension with Windows 7 as well into 2019, which is why the 3060s and 3090s will work on Windows 7. I think that's a completely wasted video card in Windows 7, but, to each his own. Will it work? Cool. Is it optimal? The other thing is it optimal? But the point of this is to try to have a vintage gaming system for next to nothing. Point of this is, can I just find a modern trash system, which in my experience, modern trash systems, people that get rid of them now, they don't want anything to do with them, are Dells and HPs, 2nd, 3rd, 4th gen. Those are the ones, i3s, i5s, those are the ones that are dropping off now. And so those are going to be the easiest common denominator to find. So that's where I go in the next video series of this trash picked. What can we do with trash laying around my store? Literally doing nothing. And this gave me a few ideas on stuff I could maybe sell on eBay as well. So anyway, thank you very much, guys, for watching this video. We're at about 24 minutes, and I appreciate you if you stuck this long. Like, subscribe, all those fun YouTube things to make the algorithms happy. And we will see you again right here on the Wayback Tech Channel when we mess around with some more old crap hardware. Peace out, everybody.